Hello. If you're watching this, maybe you're in a place I once was. A place that looks fine from the outside, a home, a relationship, a life, but on the inside, you're feeling a quiet, constant hum of dread. You can't quite name it, but it's there. In the pit of your stomach. In the way you hesitate before checking a bank statement, or the way you make excuses for a sigh that's a little too heavy, a missing item that's a little too expensive to explain away. This is the story of how I learned to listen to that hum. And how, in the end, it wasn't the loud, crashing disaster that saved me. It was the quiet decision to stop. My name is Elena, and for 10 years, I was married to a man who built a secret life in the shadows of ours. This is not just a story about debt. It's a story about trust, about the architecture of a lie, and about the moment I chose to save the one person I could still reach, myself. It began, as these things often do, with something wonderful. His name was Daniel. He was charming, not in a slick way, but in a boyish, enthusiastic way. He had big ideas. He saw potential everywhere, in a rundown property, in a new cryptocurrency, in a sure thing a friend had told him about. I was pragmatic, a project manager. I loved how he colored outside the lines I lived within. He called me his anchor. I called him my sail. We felt balanced. Our early marriage was bright. We bought a small house. It needed work, and Daniel threw himself into it. He'd talk about flipping it for a profit, and we'd use the money to travel. I budgeted for the renovations, setting aside a careful amount each month. Daniel would often go over, but he'd kiss my forehead and say, "You have to spend money to make money, my love. Trust me." And I did. I transferred the extra. The first time it was $500, then $1,000. It was for higher quality materials, for a cannot-miss opportunity, on vintage fixtures. The first crack appeared so small. A letter from a credit card company I didn't recognize, addressed to him. When I asked, he plucked it from my hand, his smile easy. "Oh, that's just the new card for the hardware store. 0% financing for the kitchen cabinets. I told you I found a deal." It made sense. I was proud of his initiative. But the hum began. A low, almost inaudible frequency. The problem wasn't the money at first. It was the story. The narrative around the money became more elaborate. The deal was always just about to pay off. The setback was always due to someone else's incompetence. A lazy contractor, a dishonest supplier. He was the brilliant strategist, perpetually thwarted by a world that didn't move as fast as his mind. I started managing all our bills. He said it was because I was better at it. And I was. But it also meant I was building a wall, a dam, between us and the consequences of his spending. I'd scrimp on groceries to cover the overdraft fee from an account he'd opened for business expenses. I'd work freelance overtime to pay the tax bill he'd temporarily forgotten. Our arguments followed a script. I'd present a number, a deficit, a mysterious charge. He'd cycle through defensiveness. "Why are you auditing me?" To victimhood. "I'm under so much pressure to provide for us." To grand, tearful promises. "It will never happen again." "You're right. I'll be better." The promises were seductive. They felt like love. They felt like he was fighting for us. He wasn't. He was fighting to preserve the system. The system where I was the responsible one, the fixer, the cleanup crew. And his role was to dream, to risk, and to be forgiven. The first time I heard the word gambling, it was wrapped in a lie. He came home at 3 a.m., smelling of cigar smoke and adrenaline. He said he'd been at an all-night poker game with investors. He'd lost $2,000. But he insisted, it was an investment in relationships. "These are the guys who know about the big development projects," he said, eyes gleaming. "You have to pay to play, Elena." I was furious, but he framed it as networking. My anger made me the small-minded wife stifling her husband's ambition. The hum grew louder. I began to walk on financial eggshells. I stopped asking about certain things. I developed a sixth sense for his mood. If he was jubilant, it meant he'd won somewhere. The sports bet, the day trading, the poker game. Money would flow in. A fancy dinner, flowers, a weekend getaway we couldn't afford. If he was sullen, locked in his office, I knew we were in a down cycle. I'd tighten my belt, mentally preparing for the moment he'd come to me, shamefaced, with a number. And I'd always cover it. Why? Love, yes. But also fear. Fear of the alternative, of collapse, of admitting this beautiful life we'd painted was a canvas covering rotten wood. And pride. I was so proud of being strong, capable, the one who could hold it all together. He nurtured that pride. I don't know what I'd do without you, he'd say, burying his face in my shoulder. You're my rock. I felt chosen. Essential. It was a drug. The pandemic lockdowns were, for us, the beginning of the end. With sports canceled and casinos closed, Daniel's outlets vanished. But the need didn't. It migrated online. He was now in his office all day, allegedly trading. The markets were volatile, he said. A roller coaster. I'd hear shouts of triumph or strings of curses through the door. The lies became stranger, more desperate. $5,000 vanished for emergency car repairs, on a car that sat in the driveway. He claimed he'd been scammed by a fake investment platform. He borrowed $10,000 from my elderly mother, telling her it was for a medical bill we were struggling with. My mother. When I found out, I felt a physical nausea. The shame was a taste in my mouth. I confronted him, and for the first time, I saw not remorse but a cold, feral anger. You think you're so perfect, he snapped. You think your constant worrying and nagging doesn't cost us? It's your energy that ruins my luck. That was a turning point. The narrative flipped. I was no longer the savior. I was the obstacle. The hum in my gut wasn't anxiety anymore. It was a warning siren. I began to secretly separate our finances. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and funneled a portion of my paycheck there. It felt like a betrayal, but for the first time it felt like breathing. I was creating an air pocket in a submarine I knew was diving too deep. Then the phone calls started. Unknown numbers. He'd let them go to voicemail, his face pale. Robocalls, he'd mutter. One day, his phone buzzed on the coffee table while he was in the shower. The screen lit up. Marcus, urgent. Followed by a text preview. Dan, the payment was due yesterday. You're not returning calls. This is your last. The water was still running. I did something I had never done before. I picked up his phone. It was unlocked. And I descended into the secret world. It wasn't just one text. It was a cascade. Threads with names I didn't know. Marcus, Leo, the office. Messages filled with jargon about points, vig, and settlements. Pleading texts to friends from college. Dude, can you float me another $3K? It's a lock this time. Then the emails. Loan applications. Online casino accounts with 5-figure losses. A second mortgage application on our house. Our house, that I had never signed. There it was. The expectation. The foundational assumption of our entire adult lives. Elena will fix it. For a decade, those words would have worked. They would have triggered my code, my programming. Assess damage. Formulate plan. Execute rescue. But standing there, looking at this man weeping on the floor, I felt nothing. A vast hollow nothing. The love had been eroded, dollar by dollar, lie by lie, until all that was left was the skeleton of duty. And that skeleton could no longer bear the weight. No, Daniel, I said. The words hung in the air, simple and final. He stopped crying, stunned. What? I said no. I am not going to help you. I cannot save you. I can only save myself now. The pleading turned to panic. then to rage. So that's it? You're just going to abandon me? When I'm down? After everything we've built? You're that selfish? They'll ruin me. They might hurt me. What about for better or for worse? He weaponized our vows. He weaponized my compassion. It was his final move. And it failed. The worse wasn't supposed to be a secret life you lived alongside me, I said, my voice still eerily calm. The worse was supposed to be something that happened to us, not something you actively did to me. You didn't just gamble money, Daniel. You gambled with my trust, my security, my future. And you lost. What followed was a logistical and legal nightmare, but it was also strangely peaceful. The emotional storm had passed. I was now in the debris field, doing the work. I stayed with a friend. I hired a lawyer. The first truly selfish, self-preserving act of money I had spent in years. It felt incredible. My lawyer was a steely-eyed woman who had seen this 1,000 times. Your job is not to be his therapist or his banker, she said. Your job is to build a moat around what is legally and rightfully yours. He will try to cross it. Your job is to keep the bridge up. Daniel oscillated between love bombing, endless, I've changed texts, pathetic gifts left on my friend's porch, and vicious blame. He told mutual friends I was cold, that I was having a midlife crisis, that I was leaving him over money problems when he was struggling with an illness. Some friends understood. Others faded away, unwilling to choose sides in a story that was too messy for their comfort. The hardest part was the guilt. In the quiet moments, the programming would try to reboot. Maybe he really is sick. Maybe leaving is cruel. Maybe a real partner would stay and fight. But then I would look at the spreadsheet my lawyer helped me build. A clean, clinical document outlining his debts, his lies, and the clarity would return. I filed for divorce. The house, saddled with debt, had to be sold. The equity was swallowed almost entirely by what he owed. I walked away with my car, my personal savings, the secret ones I'd started, and my freedom. He was left with the consequences he had so diligently hidden. The day I signed the final papers, I walked out of the lawyer's office into a bright, crisp afternoon. I expected to feel grief, or loss, or even fear. Instead, I felt light. A physical lightness. As if I had been carrying a soaked wool coat for a decade and had finally taken it off. I breathed and the air didn't taste like dread. It tasted like possibility. That was 2 years ago. Walking away wasn't revenge. Revenge is a hot emotion, and what I did was cold and quiet. It wasn't about punishing him. It was about pardoning myself. It was the beginning of my freedom. But freedom isn't just the absence of the bad thing. It's the active, daily practice of building a life on your own terms. My life now is smaller, quieter. I live in an apartment I can easily afford on my own salary. I know, to the dollar, what is in my bank account, and that number is only impacted by my own choices. The peace that brings is indescribable. It's a luxury more valuable than any handbag or vacation he ever bought with money we didn't have. I go to therapy. I've had to unpack why I stayed so long, why I confused being needed with being loved, why I thought my worth was tied to my capacity to endure. I'm learning that boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They are the gates that define where I begin and end. Daniel? I heard through the grapevine he moved in with his brother. He's reportedly in a debt management program. I hope for his sake he gets better. But his recovery is not my responsibility. His happiness is not my project. My project is me. I'm rediscovering old hobbies I'd abandoned because they seemed frivolous. Painting, hiking. I'm building friendships based on shared joy, not shared crisis. I'm dating again, slowly, cautiously, with a radar now finely tuned for inconsistency and charm that feels like a performance. The most profound change is the silence. The hum is gone. The constant, low-grade alarm in my nervous system has been disarmed. I sleep through the night. I don't jump when the phone rings. If you are hearing that hum in your own life, whether it's about debt, or lies, or any form of sustained betrayal, please listen to it. You are not crazy. That feeling is data. It is your intuition, your deepest self, telling you something is wrong. You may not be ready to walk out today. I wasn't for years. But you can start. Open a separate account. See a lawyer for a confidential consultation. Tell one trusted friend the truth. Build your air pocket, your lifeboat. Saving yourself isn't an act of spite. It is the ultimate act of self-respect. It is saying, my future is not collateral for someone else's choices. My peace is not negotiable. They may call you selfish. Let them. Selfish, I've learned, is just another word for having a self left to preserve. That day in the lawyer's office, I didn't just sign divorce papers. I signed a declaration of independence for my own soul. And every day since, I've been building a country of one. And it is finally a prosperous and peaceful place. Thank you for listening. Wait. Listen. This is a work of narrative fiction based on common experiences of financial infidelity and coercive debt. If you see yourself in this story, please know you are not alone. Resources for gambling addiction, financial abuse, and confidential legal advice can be found in the links below. Your safety and peace are worth protecting. If you want to hear more story like this, please like the video and subscribe the channel. Hit the bell icon to get notified.